Welcome back to Andersen Acres. We are in the kitchen again, and tonight we are going to make English muffins. Now, there are a lot of recipes for English muffins, but this is not one of those shortcuts. I did an easy English muffin before the previous yeast bread recipe to this video. That one is an easy version that only takes the same amount of time as any bread would take. This one is a little more complex, but gives you a more, really a more English muffin texture. So, but it does take longer. It takes a day. So you can do it either way. You can either do the quick way, which I will link to in the description of this video, or you can do it this way, which, yes, gives you a more authentic texture, but takes longer. It's your pick. It doesn't really matter that much, but I thought I would do both methods just so you could see the differences. So to get started, you want to put a cup of milk in a saucepan, which is what I've done here, and you want to heat it up over medium low or low heat, depending on your stovetop. You do not want to burn your milk. You just want to get it warm enough to melt butter. So that's what I've been doing here. It is warming up. I'm just going to turn my heat up just a little bit. So in this particular recipe, now there's going to be a lot of variations. You're going to have some English muffins that don't have yeast, some that do have yeast. You'll have some that have a lot of baking powder. Some have baking powder and baking soda. There's a lot of variation. In this particular case, we are using yeast and we will be using baking powder as well. For right now, we're not using any of that because we're just warming up some milk. So what you want to do, warm your milk up. There we go. That's better. So it's starting to warm up now. Yep. So as it starts to warm up, remember this is just 1 cup of milk. As it starts to warm up, you're going to add 1 tablespoon of honey. Okay, any honey you have is just fine, even if it's a slightly older honey. And there we go. If it's a slightly older honey and it's crystallized, it's still fine. Honey doesn't really go bad, and because you're melting it anyway, a crystallized honey will work just fine in this recipe. Or you can use a fresh honey. It doesn't really matter. It's honey. Again, it's not going to go bad on you. So a little bit of honey, 1 tablespoon, and we're just going to swirl that around a minute. If you don't have any honey, you could do this with a tablespoon of sugar instead. But I'm using honey because I have honey, and it actually gives a really nice flavor. But yes, can you use sugar? Yes, you can. If you don't have any honey or if you just don't want to wait for honey to melt, you can do that too. So to that, we are going to add about 1 tablespoon of butter. Yes, I used my fingers. We're just going with it. So you add about 1 tablespoon of butter. You do want to use butter. You do not want to substitute margarine. This is one of those times when butter really will bring out the flavor of your recipe. So yes, you do want to use a butter. Okay, a salted butter preferably. You could use unsalted, but we're going to use salted today because it just makes for a better result. In this particular case, unsalted is called for in some recipes. I'm not saying don't ever use unsalted. In this recipe, you do want to use a salted butter. So we're just going to wait for that to melt and to incorporate. I'm not going to make you watch that. We'll come back when that has happened. All right, so our butter and our honey have melted. So we're just going to whirl that together. We're going to turn our heat off, and then we are going to pull our mixture off the heat. I'm just going to give it another whirl. Now we're going to set a timer for 10 minutes, and then we're going to just ignore this. We're literally just going to let it sit here for 10 minutes. Okay, so I'm setting a timer. There goes my timer. We'll come back in 10 minutes when this has cooled sufficiently. All right, so it has been 10 minutes, and our milk mixture has cooled down enough. So now what we're going to do, we're going to take this, and we're just going to pour it into a bowl. Okay? We're not going to need the whisk anymore, so we can set that aside. Next, you're wanting to get traditional yeast. That's what this is, traditional yeast, not bread machine. And what we're going to do is we're going to take 1 heaping teaspoon, 1 big heaping teaspoon, and just sprinkle it across the surface of your milk. Okay, your warm milk. Remember, it's warm, but it's not hot enough to kill the yeast. There we go. Just give that a sprinkle, 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 sprinkle. There we go. Don't stir it in. We're just going to leave it. Okay, so just leave it like that. We're going to leave that for 10 minutes. And at this point, somebody's going to ask me, can I do this in the bread maker? In theory, yes. In practicality, don't bother. There's no point. It doesn't save you any time. You end up having to do all these same steps. You just have to open and close the bread maker the entire time. So don't bother, because you would still have to heat the milk in a saucepan, and then you have to put that in the bread maker, and then you got to sprinkle the yeast, and then you got to wait, and then you got to add flour later, and then you got to add salt. It's very crazy. So don't bother with the bread maker. Just do this one by hand. It's really, really easy, I promise. So we are going to set another timer for 10 minutes to let that yeast develop. Then we'll come back yet again. All right, so now our yeast is foamy, so that should be slightly frothy sitting on top there. And if it's not, your yeast is dead. So if it still just looks like little balls of yeast sitting on the top of your dough, of your fluid, then your yeast is dead. Get new yeast. Yeah, can't even talk today. But as long as it is frothy like this, your yeast is fine. You can proceed. So now what we're going to do, give this a little bit of a mix with a wooden spoon. It is kind of good to use a wooden spoon. Technically, you could use anything, just don't use metal. Do not use a metal utensil or a metal bowl. So either use a glass bowl or a plastic bowl, and either use like a silicone utensil or a wooden utensil or a plastic utensil. Just don't use metal, because that'll interfere with the development of the yeast. So once we've mixed that in a little bit, you want to add 2 cups of flour. I know that doesn't sound like enough. It is, I promise. 2 cups of flour, and just take your wooden spoon and mix that up. Don't use your hands, because this is going to be really, really sticky, and this is going to be kind of mucky, so I wouldn't use my hands. You can, but I wouldn't. So just give that a good mix. Kind of swoop it up onto the sides to grab that excess flour. And just keep going till it's a pretty uniform dough. You're not kneading. This isn't really, it's sort of a batter bread, but not really. So you're not kneading it, you're just mixing it. So just give that a good mix. Now we're going to do something normally we tell you not to do. So English muffins, real English muffins, not the easy kind, are the result of overproofed dough. So dough that has risen too much and has collapsed in on itself. Normally we tell you to avoid that when you're baking, right? Don't let that happen, because your dough is wrecked. You can't use it, it won't rise. Except we actually want that to happen this time. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to ignore this dough until it rises and then collapses in on itself. That'll take anywhere from 8 to 12 hours, okay? Because there is a significant amount of yeast for the amount of flour that's in here. It'll just take time to rise and then fall again. So what we're going to do, this is why I use a short wooden spoon so I can stick it in there. We're going to pop this lid on, but I'm not going to snap it down, okay? This lid is just to keep some of the humidity in. I'm not going to snap the whole lid down. I'm just going to snap part of it. I'm going to leave this because you want air to be able to escape. So I'm going to leave part of that open. And then I'm going to take a dish towel and cover that up. There we go. Cover that up like that. Okay, so you want your lid sort of on, not all the way. There we go. So you don't want your lid all the way on. You just want to keep most of the humidity in. You do want some of that humidity to be able to escape. Otherwise, this might blow up. You don't want that. So if you don't want it to blow up, just gently cover it. Okay? Gently. You don't want that blowing up. So now we have to ignore it. It's going to take 8 to 12 hours. And I mean that. So go to bed. This is why I'm doing this in the evening, because I can come back tomorrow morning and start on the dough then. There will be more ingredients to add, specifically a little bit of salt and a little bit of baking powder, but only a very little bit. Okay, then we can actually start making our English muffins. Until then, we're now going to go to bed, because it's going to be 8 to 12 hours before this dough is ready to cook. All right, so it is now morning. So let's take a look. Oh yeah, that collapsed. And you could tell it collapsed because it obviously had been up on the sides and now it has fallen down and now it looks weird. When it looks weird, it's ready. So the first thing you want to do is you want to take half a teaspoon of baking powder, add that in, and then you want half a teaspoon of salt. Any salt is fine. I'm just using table salt. It really doesn't matter. And then give that a good mix. Kind of just move that around. You can use your hands if you want. I'm not because I don't want to take my ring off. So just mix that around like so. Kind of go up on the edges. And I am going to take my ring off in a second. I just don't want to right now. Okay. All right. Hate taking my ring off this early, so. Okay. Get all your dough off your wooden spoon. And then get rid of the wooden spoon. You don't need that anymore. So now you have a dough that actually is more like a regular bread dough now. Last night it was really, really loose, but now it's actually excellent. There's a cat on the table. Get off. Get off. Get off. Barn cat. The barn cat just slid off the edge. That's okay. Yes, barn cat. She's not supposed to be in the house. It's not my fault. Okay, so now we have this dough. So now what we want to do, you're going to need some kind of mat or a cutting board. I could just use the silicone mat. That's fine. But I'm not going to. I'm going to use this because I can move it easily. And you're going to want a little bowl with cornmeal. That's all that is. It's just cornmeal. So then what you're going to do is take your dough and decide how big you want your English muffins. Kind of make them sort of round. It doesn't matter. And then cornmeal, shake it off, put it on the mat. Doesn't matter how much cornmeal is in there. It really doesn't matter at all because you can always add more and you can always just reuse the cornmeal that doesn't end up sticking to your English muffins. Okay? So again, same deal. Make it sort of round. It's not that important. You can make them any shape you want, to be honest. Cornmeal. There you go. How many you make really depends on how big you make them. So you can make them really big. You could make them fairly small. Okay? Cornmeal. I'm kind of going with a medium size. So you just keep doing that. Then what we're going to do is cover them with a tea towel. The same tea towel I had the whole thing covered with before. So just cover them with a tea towel and let them sit for 10 minutes. Set a timer. Yes, there's a lot of setting 10-minute timers in this one. But you definitely want to set a 10-minute timer and then cover these guys up and ignore them for 10 minutes. It just helps them poof up a little bit. Then we'll come back and cook them. I promise we're very close to having delicious English muffins. It's worth waiting overnight. Okay, it is worth it, I promise. These are delicious. Okay. So I'm going to stop the recording. You don't need to keep watching me do this. So finish doing what we're doing. Then cover them with a tea towel and set a 10-minute timer. When that 10-minute timer has expired, we will be back. All right, so while your 10-minute timer is going, waiting for your English muffins to puff up a little bit, you want to preheat a pan with a little bit of oil or maybe a little bit of margarine in the bottom, just a very little. You don't want a ton of oil. It's just to prevent any sticking. I'm using a copper pan, so there won't be a lot of sticking anyway. But just in case, just a thin coating of oil or margarine. Don't use butter. It may burn. It shouldn't. We're cooking at a very low heat. But just in case, don't use butter. So what we're going to do now, preheat this to medium-low or lower. Do not go above medium-low. Anything higher than that and your English muffins will burn instead of cook because we want the insides to cook, and if we cook them at too high a heat, the outsides will cook, but the insides will still be raw. So medium low or lower. So feel free to turn your element down if you think it's too hot. Do not turn it up. So preheat your pan. Once your buns, your English muffins have rested for 10 minutes, you're going to pick them up gently. And we're just going to lay them in the skillet. There shouldn't be any sizzling. Remember, this is not a warm pan. It's not warm. So there shouldn't be any sizzling. This is a very, as far as stovetop temperature goes, this is a very cool temperature. But that's the point. So just lay them in there gently. You don't want to deflate them. Now the size that I did, I have 10 English muffins. So I am going to cook 6 of them at a time. I'm not going to put one in the middle. Then you want to get a lid. Cover them up to keep the heat in. That helps cook them. Cover them up. Set a timer for 10 minutes. I know, another 10-minute timer. Then come back and check them. So you don't have to watch this part. This is boring. So we'll cut ahead and come back after 10 minutes. All right, it's been 10 minutes. Let's check and see. Take the lid off. You're going to need that lid again, so don't get rid of it. So we're just going to flip one over. Nice and golden. That's good. If you need 10 more minutes or 5 more minutes, that's okay too. If you don't think they're dark enough, or if you want them darker. But right now, we're just going to flip them over because we're going to, not use our fingers, except, yes, I am using my fingers, right? Ow. Shouldn't use your fingers. You shouldn't, but you do what you got to do. Ow. So now we're going to cover them again. 10 minutes again. Okay? You don't have to watch because it's boring. So we're going to turn the camera off, come back when they are fully cooked. All right, so now that has been 10 minutes on that side. Let's just pull the lid off. They are fine. I know that they're cooked. But if you need a few more minutes, you just flip them over again. They're nice and cooked. So they are cooked in the center. What you want to do is remove them from the pan onto a wire rack so they can cool. And you want to let them cool at least 5 minutes before you touch them because they're still pretty toasty in the center. So I'm going to remove these to a rack and let them cool, and we'll come back and cut one open in just a few minutes. All right, so our English muffins are completely finished. They are cooked on the inside. Let me just show you what one looks like. Just like that, they are still steamy, and the other 4 are still on the pan. But that is what they look like on the inside. They are delicious and a lot of fun to make. So I hope you enjoyed making English muffins here with us today at Andersen Acres, and I really do hope you give this a try on your own. Yes, it takes a little bit of time. You do have to let the batter sit overnight, but in the end, they really are fantastic and they are worth the wait. We'll see you tomorrow.